As the night deepens, the veil between worlds grows perilously thin. The Samhain fires roar higher, casting shadows that twist and dance across stone walls and thatched roofs. The villagers gather close, their faces half lit by flame, half lost in darkness, whispering old prayers to keep wandering spirits at bay. Yet, with every gust of autumn wind, it feels as though unseen eyes are watching, as though ancient presences walk beside them in the mist. Children cling to charms strung around their necks, while elders trace protective signs in the air. Sparks from the bonfire leap skyward, carrying hopes and fears into the unknown. This is no longer the simple joy of harvest. It is a night heavy with mystery, a night where every creak of wood, every rustle of leaves might be a spirit reaching across the veil. Here begins the darker telling of Halloween, where tradition meets terror and courage is tested against the shadows. By the early Middle Ages, the Church had taken notice of Samhain. Its fires, its offerings, its ghosts. It was too potent a night to leave untouched, and so, with the slow patience of centuries, Christianity laid new meanings over the old festival. Samhain became the eve of All Saints' Day, or Hallowmas. November 1st was dedicated to the saints in heaven, and November 2nd became All Souls' Day, when prayers rose for the countless dead waiting in purgatory. Yet beneath these new names, the older rhythms of fire and car. On the eve of All Saints, the bells tolled in village churches, their iron tongues swinging solemnly into dusk. The sound carried over fields and cottages, summoning the faithful not only to prayer, but to remembrance. Families lit candles in churchyards, placing them on graves so that wandering souls might find their way home. Some still set bread and bowls of milk at thresholds, just as their ancestors had done, but now they called them offerings for the poor, who went door to door reciting prayers in exchange. The bonfire remained, but even it was reshaped. Where once druids sparked flame from wood, now priests blessed the blaze with holy water, lifting their hands in the sign of the cross as sparks leapt upward. Villagers still carried brands home to rekindle hearths, but the smoke was said to shorten the sufferings of souls in purgatory. Fire had become intercession. Its warmth no longer only guarded against spirits, but rose as prayer for the unseen multitudes between heaven and earth. Old charms bent into Christian shapes. Rowan twigs, once marked with pagan symbols, were carved with Christ's cross and nailed to doors. Lanterns that had frightened away wandering shades were said to light the steps of angels. Doors left ajar on this night were not for ancestors, but for the messengers of God who might still come calling. Christianity did not erase Samhain, it baptized it, overlaying familiar gestures with a new theology. The people could honor both heritage and faith in one motion. The Miento's soul cakes became a ritual of this blending. Bakers pressed a cross into each small round loaf. Children and beggars went from door to door, receiving cakes and leaving behind prayers for the households. By the late Middle Ages, another shadow had fallen across Halloween, the witch. Where once Samhain had spoken mostly of the dead and the divine, it now bristled with whispers of women riding the night sky. Across Europe, tales spread of Sabbaths where witches consorted with demons, brewed storms, and blighted fields. On All Hallows Eve, their power was believed to be at its peak. Villagers eyed the moon for silhouettes, watched their milk curdle overnight, and blamed sudden sickness on a neighbor whose gaze, the image of the witch, hardened in woodcut and pamphlet. She wore a crooked hat, clutched a broomstick, and trailed a black cat. In a world racked by plague, hunger, and war, fear demanded faces, and witches provided them. Trials flared across Europe, some brief, some brutal. Innocents burned for the comfort of communities who needed enemies to name. Halloween, once the night of the dead, became also a night of suspicion, its bonfires serving not only to honor the saints, but to ward against unseen Sabbaths. Yet fear breeds protection as much as accusation. Families lined thresholds with salt, hung rowan twigs above doors, and trusted cats to guard the hearth. Bonfires, too, were lit as much for protection as for memory. A circle drawn in ash, a prayer whispered at moonrise, a charm stitched into a child's sleeve. All were shields against imagined malice. Whether witches were real or not mattered less than the truth that people needed ways to face their dread. But centuries turned, and dread softened. The witch, from nightmare, slipped gradually into masquerade. By the Renaissance, her image lingered in carnival plays. By the Victorian age, she stood on greeting cards, her crooked hat made comical, her broomstick quaint. In America, children wore pointed hats and laughed in the very shapes that once drew accusations. What had begun as trials ended as costumes. What had burned at the stake became paper silhouettes strung in windows. And so the witch endured, not as terror, but as symbol. She passed from fear into folklore, from accusation into amusement. Today, her broom sweeps across the moon on every Halloween poster. In the Celtic lands of Ireland and Scotland, Halloween night shimmered with an extra layer of peril. The fair folk, the Sidhe, dwellers in mounds and hills, were thought to be restless when the year turned. On Samhain, their doors opened. Lights glowed over fairy mounds like lanterns. Music drifted on the wind, though no piper could be seen. Those who followed the sound might never return. Seizing kept families cautious. Elders spoke of Nera, who, on a Samhain night, entered a fairy mound and walked in the other world. Though he returned, centuries seemed to pass in a blink. In Scotland, tales of Tam Lin told of mortal lovers seized by the Queen of Fairies and only freed by courage and cleverness. Changelings haunted cradles. A healthy infant could be stolen, replaced with a sickly fairy child. Mothers laid iron tongs across the crib or whispered charms over their babies to guard them. Logistical. Yet Samhain was not only danger, it was a night of riddles and visions. Divinations flourished. Young women sowed hemp seed by moonlight, chanting for a glimpse of their future husband. Cabbages were pulled from fields, their shape and size read as omens of fortune. Ash, scattered on the hearth, revealed ghostly footprints by morning, showing who in the household might not live to see another year. Churchyards, too, glowed with candles, but in villages, the mischief of fairies was feared as much as death. To walk alone was risky, crossroads were dangerous places, but within homes, laughter softened the edge of dread. Girls placed mirrors before candles, staring into the glass to see a face appear behind them, their destined love, or in some tales, the shadow of death. Imprisoned. And always, fire anchored the night. Its smoke and sparks shielded against the unseen. Lanterns carved from turnips, grimacing, glowing faces, were set at gates to ward off trickster spirits. The tale of Jack of the Lantern grew here, a soul denied both heaven and hell, doomed to wander the dark with only a coal in his hollowed turnip for light. He walked the paths forever, a warning and a companion to every traveler. When Halloween crossed the ocean with Irish and Scottish immigrants, it found new soil in America. The old turnip lanterns gave way to pumpkins, larger, easier to carve, their orange glow brighter against the autumn night. Jack's grim face found a new body, grinning from porches across towns and cities. Parlor games thrived in the 19th century. In candlelit rooms, young men and women bobbed for apples, tossed nutshells into fires, and recited rhymes to glimpse their futures. These diversions softened what had once been solemn rites. A night of omens became a night of amusements, yet still beneath the laughter was the echo of Samhain and Pomona, of fairies and saints. By the early 20th century, Halloween was becoming a children's holiday. Costumes grew popular, at first homemade from sheets and old clothes, then increasingly crafted for play. Witches, ghosts, and devils paraded down streets, their once feared shapes now tamed into masks and fun. Communities organized parties, schools held pageants, and neighborhoods glowed with jack-o'-lanterns. Trick or treat emerged from older customs of souling and guising. Children knocked on doors, rewarded with sweets instead of soul cakes. The phrase trick or treat carried the memory of older threats, but turned them into playful bargaining. Mischief remained, outhouses tipped, gates unhinged, but more and more the night tilted toward laughter and generosity. Pumpkin fields, autumn leaves, candlelit windows, these became the icons of a distinctly American Halloween. What began as Samhain's sacred fire and Rome's orchard festival, what was reshaped by church bells and haunted by witches, now became a celebration of imagination and community. It carried fear and fun together, a festival of memory and masquerade. By the 21st century, Halloween was global. Costumes spanned superheroes to skeletons, pumpkins glowed in cities far from Celtic hills, and the night of fire, saints, fairies, and witches lived on as both entertainment and echo. Beneath every mask, however, is the same truth. Halloween is the child of Samhain, of Pomona, of saints and storytellers, of fire and shadow. Its heart still beats with the rhythm of ancient nights.